In order for you to select a domain name, firstly you have to understand what is domain name. So domain name is where visitors able access to your website through the internet. Basically, domain name also considered as your website name. So when it is in the internet server, or we call it DNS, domain name server, they will identify your website with the IP address. So IP address is a string of numbers, so it's pretty much difficult for human to identify, especially if people want to visit your website. They can't just put in the IP address, which is very tedious. So normally the IP address of your website can be easily identified when you log into your web host control panels, as you see on my screen. So domain names is developed for a human to easily identify your website. For example, this website is Electronic Vapor and the IP address is 108.167.183.6. So that IP address is actually your website IP address. So normally our devices such as computer and laptops have our own IP address. So sometimes you can see who viewed your website, and there is a public IP address as you see on the screen, so you can know who actually visit your website from which countries. So a domain name is a combination of any words and letters, and it can be used in various domain name extension. You have your domain, which is example.com. So .com is your extension. So altogether, name plus extension would be your domain name. So domain name must be registered when you buy a web host, so they know which website they're going to host it. And every domain name is unique. So if you have registered this domain name is belong to you, and no one else have the same domain name. So selecting a suitable domain name is not a rocket science thing to do. It's basically more towards common sense. Anyway, I would like to show you some key points on how to select a very suitable domain name based on your website that you are building. So if you are building your personal website, you can put in your nickname, for example, jblaw.site. It's very simple. Or you can put in some very fancy words, for example, blogging with JB or jbcorner.site. So if you want to build a website that's going to showcase your product, of course, you need to put in your product name, right? So if you want to build a business website, of course, you're going to put in your company name. So if it's an engineering company, it's always a good idea to put in the engineering words inside this domain name. So I'm going to point out two typical mistakes that people select on their domain name. So firstly is the numbers. So I would suggest that please don't put any numbers on your domain name. The main reason why is that if you put numbers, the search engines somehow cannot detect your domain name. And it is not very efficient when search engines are going to locate your website, because you're putting numbers which is irrelevant to your name, to your professions. They're basically numbers. So another mistake is that people tend to use symbols, for example, dash or underscore, which is a very common mistake. So at some point you need to put in some dash to point out the profession, the keywords. It's okay, but try your best not to put in any symbols whatsoever. For example, if you put in a symbols and you put in the numbers, this website, as you can see on the screen, jb-9790.site, for me it seems like a scam website. It seems like a fraud website. When people go to your website seeing this kind of domain name, they would just freak out and just exit your website. So right now I'm going to teach you two key tricks on how to optimize your domain name in the search engine, the Google, the Yahoo, and other search engines. The first one is to use the keywords. So if you're doing marketing, of course you're gonna put marketers inside. So nickname marketers.site. My name is JB, so jbmarketer.site. Or you can put marketing with jb.site or jbmarketingcorners.site. So try to improvise a bit on the name, but make sure it's not too long. Or if you are a freelancer, you can put jbfreelancer.site. So secondly, it's all about target area or location. So if you want to build a coffee shop website, of course your coffee shop is going to locate somewhere in any parts of the world. So Seattle coffee brewer.site is a very good example. So when people try to search, is there any coffee shop in Seattle, your website tends to show up in the search engine. Or San Jose Vapors.shop. So vapor stands for something like the vaping, which is the electronic cigarettes. So if you have a physical shop, best way is to put in the location of your shop inside this domain name. So right now it's on the extension, which is the .com. So basically generic top level domain is pretty much unrestricted and available for any entities, any person or organization. It means that if you buy this kind of top level domain name, you can practically do anything on this website. So .com is like the most famous extension in the world. So I'm going to show you some of the popular generic top level domain, which is .com. It's totally for any organizations or company. .net basically for technical site or internet infrastructure sites. Or you can have org, which stands for organization. So previously it was for non-profit organization, but right now it's totally unrestricted. And also .space, it is a website for showcase your idea and your personal philosophy. It's basically like a blogging website. So when people try to build a blog, they usually use .space. So it's good to have them, but one of the biggest disadvantages is that it is pretty expensive. That probably costs you $10 to $12 per year. Right now there are so many cheap and new generic domain name that you can choose. So if you want to go for .com, you can choose other new generic top level domain names such as .website, .site, or .store. So .site is pretty much new and it is a perfect replacement for .com. So if you want to go for .com, you might as well consider go for .website. It's gonna be like 90% cheaper than .com. And .site is something very global. You can do it with anything. If you have a personal website, you can use .site. If you have a company website, you can use .site for anything. .store is basically for e-commerce website or a shop website that you're going to sell things. Or for .net, you can replace it with .online or .tech for personal blogger where they want to showcase their ideas or their personal life. Most people choose .online instead of .net. And .tech is quite a fancy name, so it seems like a very technological website. So for .org, you can choose .website, .site, and .tech. While for .space, you can go for .online, which is something like a personal website, or .website, which can use for totally anything. So if you want to build a personal website or a individual professional website, you can go for your name, your profession, .site, .space, or .tech. For example, my website jbinnovator.site. So if you're doing something very advanced, you can go for .tech. So if you want to build a company or organization website, you can go for company name, .site, .online, and .website. So normally people will go for .com, so I would suggest you to replace it with .site, .online, or .website. For example, JB Marketers, my company name, .online. So for a business or e-commerce website, You can put company name dot website dot tag, and as I explained it before, this is the best way to put in SSL certificate because people are going to submit their sensitive credentials to you. So for example, my company name JB Growth Hackers is a fancy terms in marketing, so .tag, which seems like a very legit domain name. Or if you have an online store, you can put shop name. Best way to put is .store or .shop. These two generic top-level domain names are pretty cheap and very good because the extension simply tells you that this website is an online store or online shop. So again, you need to put in SSL certificate. It is much more secured for visitors. So for example, the shop name JB, which is my name, private labels is a simply like the products which I'm going to sell, a private label product. So I'm going to put it as JB private labels .store. So when people goes to this website that has the extension as .store, they are expecting products inside my website. So right now, I think you have a pretty good idea on how to choose a domain name. So domain name, please put your personal name, company name, or your profession and some of the keywords. And for the extensions, my advice is to go for a new generic top-level domain, which is .website, .site, .tag, .online, .store, .shop, because they are very cheap, and I'm going to show you in the next tutorial.